Well, hi, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to another edition of Breaking News for this Saturday, the 26th day of April, 2025. And we actually have major updates on four of the stories that we covered earlier today. The deadly explosion that destroyed the Iran port now has reported that over 500 people have been killed. You recall earlier, the first report was they weren't sure if anyone was dead. Then there was a second report, there were six deaths. Now there's the latest figure was 518 from Breitbart. So we'll be following that story. Progress made on getting a deal. The third round of U.S.-Iran nuclear talks in Oman continue on. So we've heard that from the Jerusalem Post, which is interesting. Jerusalem Post had another story the same day, how the talks aren't going well. So again, we'll talk about that. Now, on other news, Zelensky said his meeting with Trump today at the Vatican was potentially historic. He was very upbeat about it. That's important. And then we're told that Putin actually told Witkoff that Russia is ready for talks with Ukraine without preconditions. So we seem to be moving towards something. So we'll again wait and see. And finally, the old geezer, Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, or Abu Mazen, 89 years of age. Today he said the Jewish temples were in Yemen, not Jerusalem. The man is losing his marbles. He's not already lost them. All right, so let's go to the headlines and look at these stories because they're really profound, each of them. First one, deadly explosion destroys Iran port, over 500 reported dead. This is in Breitbart. A huge explosion this morning killed more than 500 people and destroyed large parts of the Iranian port of Shahid Rajaee, southwest of Bandar Abbas, along the shores of the Persian Gulf. A video posted on YouTube shows a close-up the moment of the explosion as a tanker truck passes a distant fire in the port. Another video posted on X by a worker inspecting buildings in the aftermath shows the immense damage to buildings as black smoke rises from the Shahid Rajaee port as a helicopter drops water onto the fire still burning there. The port is located in southwestern Iran and is one of Iran's main oil facilities. So far, 516 people have been reported dead, a spokesman for the country's emergency services said. The explosion occurred, of course, as Iran began a third round of nuclear talks with the United States and Oman. However, so far there is no indication of any link between the two events. An Iranian news service reported that a fuel tank had exploded for an unknown reason and port operations had been suspended. State broadcaster IRIB said the explosion took place in the chemical and sulfur area of the port. Hossein Zafari, a spokesman for Iran's crisis management organization, appeared to blame the explosion on poor storage of chemicals in the containers at Shahid Rajaee. The cause of the explosion was the chemicals inside the containers, he told Iran's ILNA news agency. Previously, the director of the crisis management had given warnings to this port during their visits and had pointed out the possibility of danger. So their official story is poor storage of chemicals in their plant there. All right, a couple things. If you recall, a few weeks ago, we have new people didn't hear this. We'd mentioned it briefly this morning. We talked about if the United States and Israel takes a while before they attack Iran, there's others who are not going to wait, and they were going to do things internally to the country, and you'll start seeing things like this happen. I was told that 3 weeks ago, and this is actually what happened today. I was told also when I was following up on this today, watch out for more accidents, we're told, and they're going to happen very soon. So they're going to see more accidents like this in Iran because there are powers that be that want to see Iran stop with what they're doing, particularly in the oil market, because they're selling oil to Russia and China, and by supporting the Houthis, these tankers can't get through the Red Sea area, and it's costing billions of dollars to the oil companies, both of these things together. And so enough is enough. So things are being done to stop that. And so, and again, more accidents, and not just soon, very, very soon. So we'll expect to see more accidents like this. And Iran will probably have to blame poor storage or whatever else on it. Anyway, so this is profound. Over 500 people dead with this. Okay, headline number two. Progress made on getting a deal. The third round of the U.S.-Iran talks concludes in Oman. This is from the Jerusalem Post. This is their upbeat story. They get a real negative one, too. Iran's foreign minister voices optimism after talks to the U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff, citing serious progress. U.S. officials call talks positive, but say more work is needed. The next round with the IAEA participation is set for next weekend. The third round of talks between the U.S. and Iran concluded Saturday afternoon in Oman, with both sides expressing cautious optimism about the possibility of reaching an agreement. The discussions were held in the capital of Oman called Muscat, with Steve Witkoff, Trump's envoy to the Middle East, and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, with Omani Foreign Minister Badr al-Busaidi mediating. The talks lasted several hours, we're told, and Iranian officials voiced satisfaction with the outcome, while U.S. representatives said progress had been made towards a potential deal, whatever that means. At the conclusion of the meetings, al-Busaidi announced that negotiations would continue next week, with a meeting between senior officials from both nations scheduled for May 3rd. He said the two sides shared a common aspiration to reach an agreement based on mutual respect and lasting commitments. Al-Busaidi added that the talks focused on basic principles, objectives, and technical issues. And like we said, interestingly, the Jerusalem Post had another story telling us how the talks are not going well, but heading for collapse. So again, only time will tell what will happen. But when we get the horse's mouth out of Oman, they're all upbeat on all sides, it seems. So we will see. Again, time will tell. Now, here's one that we follow up on what we did this morning. There is a picture of Trump and Zelensky having a talk there at the Vatican before the Pope's funeral. And you could tell by their body language, they're in a very cordial type of talk. In other words, when you talk to someone, you're yeah, let's do this, let's do that type of thing. It was very cordial, and that seems to be what turned out to be the case. Zelensky says meeting with Trump and Vatican potentially historic. It's also from Breitbart. Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky proclaimed that his meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump on the sidelines of the funeral for Pope Francis has the potential to become historic. He met with President Trump in St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican after joining other world leaders in paying their respects to the Pope. A photograph of the meeting showed Trump and Zelensky sitting opposite each other in the chairs within the grand 16th century church. By the way, Zelensky got a front row seat at the funeral of the Pope along with Donald Trump. And some of the other ones that were thought to be in the front row were put back in fact, Starmer, the head of the UK, the prime minister there, got, as according to the UK Daily Mail, he was put back in the cheap seats, but Zelensky got front row. So interesting there. Anyway, the meeting came amid increasing tensions between Washington and Kiev, which has so far balked at the peace deal framework laid out by Trump's administration's negotiators, likely including Ukraine ceding land to Russia, which Zelensky has claimed is a non-starter despite having failed to have won back the land over the past 3 years of war. The White House said the meeting between the two leaders took place for around 15 minutes and was very productive, with more details to be published later today on Saturday. For his party, Zelensky wrote on X, I probably should be for his part, good meeting. We discussed a lot one-on-one, hoping for results on everything we covered, protecting lives of our people, full and unconditional ceasefire, reliable and lasting peace that will prevent another war from breaking out. Well, wouldn't that be wonderful if that happened? A very symbolic meeting that has potential to become historic if we achieve joint results. Thank you, President Trump. Now, what's interesting, as we've talked about earlier, senior level officials in Washington, to include Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Vice President J.D. Vance, have warned that if an agreement is not reached soon, the Trump administration will withdraw from the negotiating table. However, as he touched down on Rome, yesterday, President Trump expressed optimism about the progress of the talks with Russia and Ukraine in the recent days. And this is what's coming out. They are very close to a deal, and the two sides should now meet at very high levels to finish it off. Most of the major points are agreed to. Stop the bloodshed now, uppercase, all letters. We will be wherever it's necessary to help facilitate the end of this cruel and senseless war, he wrote on Truth Social. All right, so again, the news continues to point to a possible deal, as our next story also indicates, and this is headline number 4 from the Jerusalem Post. Putin told Witkoff Russia is ready for talks with Ukraine without preconditions. Russian President Vladimir Putin has reiterated the Russian side's readiness for talks with Ukraine without preconditions at a meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff. This is the Interfax news agency that reported it today, citing Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov. Witkoff met Putin for 3 hours in Moscow on Friday to discuss the U.S. plan to end the war in Ukraine And Trump said the two sides were very close to a deal despite apparent differences in their positions. Now, this would be very good news, again, if it were true. As we have been saying also, this is what we expect to happen eventually. So Russia would be freed up to invade Israel at some time in the future. Because recall, according to scripture, Ezekiel 38:39, the leader Gog and his nations will invade Israel in the last days. And we've talked about Gog is the leader of Russia in Appendix 1 of our book, the Ezekiel 38:39 invasion. We talk about that, where it talks about Rosh. Rosh is speaking is a proper noun, speaking of a physical place that's to the north of Babylon, to the north of Israel, and that would be modern day Russia. It has been believed and taught by that, historically in the 19th century by Wilhelm Gesenius. Gesenius was or Gesenius, he was the top Hebrew lexicographer, or the person who puts the dictionaries together for Hebrew language in the 19th century. And in his Latin edition, he had a whole page about this issue, about the identity of Gog and Rosh. And Rosh in particular, he said it refers to the country that is modern day Russia. Now, he wasn't a Christian. He certainly wasn't into Bible prophecy, but this is what he said. And we have about, I think, something like a dozen different sources that teach the same thing, that, sources that are authentic and sources that are in the know. So check that out. Again, in our book, the Ezekiel 38:39 invasion, Appendix 1, Rosh refers to Russia. And so they're going to be leading the parade with Iran and basically Iran is ancient Persia, as we said, and Turkey, of course, is ancient Gomer and Bet Togarmah. They're going to be surrogates, but they're going to be part of the attack. So that tells us there'll still be fighters from these countries, although they won't be leading the charge. And so we talk about this in two of our books, 25 Signs. We're near the end, Signs 9 through 11, and of course, Ezekiel 38:39 invasion, where we've gone into great detail on all of this. Again, they're all free. That's our ministry, free downloads from our website, Educating Our World. Please take advantage of them. And they're under the heading of Bible prophecy. All right, our last headline. This is not a Onion story or Babylon Bee. This guy's absolutely out of his mind. The Palestinian Authorities, Mahmoud Abbas, claims ancient Jewish temples were actually in Yemen, not Jerusalem. This is from the Jerusalem Post. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas claimed Israel is trying to change the historical and legal status of the Islamic and Christian holy places, especially the blessed Al-Aqsa Mosque. He claimed that the ancient temples tying the Jewish people to Jerusalem are actually in Yemen and not Israel during a PLO Central Council meeting. Israel is trying to change the historical and legal status of these holy places, especially our blessed mosque, he says. It's the target of the most hideous plot by the occupation. They spread incitement for its destruction and the building of a Jewish temple in its place. The Al-Aqsa Mosque is built on top of the Temple Mount, a holy site for all Abrahamic faiths. Despite the religious significance of the site, only Muslims are able to pray there, and much controversy and outrage have erupted in recent years as Jewish individuals, including National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, have ascended to the site. In the Noble Quran, and I believe that also in other divine books, it says that the first and second temples were in Yemen, he said. This is Abbas. People who like reading about religion can check it out. The Jews say this is ours and that was ours, and this is where Solomon's temple was. Abbas added, I'm telling you, a large part of history is falsified. People who read the Quran know this. All right, this man is 89 years of age. And also, too, we document in our book, The Jews, Jerusalem, the Coming Temple, there was a handbook put out by Muslims at the beginning, about, I think it's in 1920, 20 to 25. And, if you would go there to the Temple Mount and visit it, and about 100 years ago, it said in the handbook, the little handout they have there, that this was the site of the original temple that David had the idea for it, Solomon built. In other words, Solomon's temple stood here. That was the Muslim position 100 years ago, because that was where the facts were. Of course, that has all changed right now. And so Abbas, like I said, he's 89. He seemingly lost his mind. In fact, today he actually named a possible replacement for his leadership there, the head of the Palestinian Authority. As far as the location of the temple, no one who knows anything about the matter agrees with this lunacy. You want to see our book, The Jews, Jerusalem, and the Coming Temple. Also a free download from our website, Educating Our World, under the heading of Bible Prophecy, where we go into detail about the location of the temple and all of that. And it's a given. No one who knows anything about the subject would say what Abbas has said. He's out of his mind. All right, so these are the stories. They got a lot of updates from earlier. Fascinating things are going on. We will keep you posted as always. So until next time, as always, I'm Don Stewart. Thanks for watching, and may the Lord, as always, richly, richly bless.